Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello there.
Hi. Let's start this. How are you?
Well, in this quarantine, I have to tell you that I'm quite tired. But who isn't, right?
Yes. Not only tired, but also, I don't know, anxious with all this situation, right?
Exactly, exactly. And then it's a whole new paradigm shift. We have to plan virtual lessons and we have to maybe have our students go through a new adaptation period. And it all combines up to anxiety and everything else.
Yes. So, can we start the transmission? So, let's start. I'm Wellington Oliveira, for those who don't know me. I'm the first vice president of Prestiso Belém chapter, and I'm here to welcome you to our second webinar, Managing Young Learners Virtually, right? Which will be delivered by Gabriel Vieira, this person here, a video. And it's a very interesting and relevant topic due to the situation we are living, right? And we also would like to remind you that the first webinar delivered by Rita Ladeia and Susana Vignotti, titled O Ensino de Idiomas Durante e Após a Pandemia, is currently available in our channel in YouTube. Okay, so you can go there and access it and watch it. And well, this event is brought to you by Vertical Belém chapter with the support of our national sponsors, Cultura Inglesa, GSOP Financial Literacy, GISAL, Rich Education Group, and National Graphic. So thank you for your support. And well, Vertical is the Brazil's largest association of teachers of English to speakers of other languages. We are a not-for-profit organization, which means we are volunteers and we do it for you all, right? We believe that sharing is caring, so this is for you. Enjoy this fantastic webinar, and we are finally honored to introduce you, Gabriel Vieira. He's a
Thank you.
CELTA and a CP holder who has been teaching English for about 10 years. He has already presented a range of subjects on international and national conferences, such as Brstisto and ABCI. Gabriel gathers experience in teacher training, Cambridge exams preparation courses, general English, and bilingual education. Nowadays, Gabriel works as a main class teacher on a Canadian school, Maple Bear, fostering literacy and numeracy skills on second and fifth graders, right?
Now,
In the end of
fifth
this,
graders as well.
yeah. So, in the end of this presentation, Gabriel is going to answer some of your questions. So, please, if you have any doubts or something you would like to ask, write on the comments, and we are going to select the most relevant ones. You can also contact Gabriel in his social media. Can you say your Instagram?
Yes, my Instagram is Gabriel underline VS underline. So you can go there and follow or send me a message, and I'll be very happy to answer any further question you might have.
Yeah. So please, Gabriel, feel welcomed by our audience. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Wellington. So, as Wellington said, I've been a teacher for 10 years, for about 10 years. This is my 11th year teaching English, and it's a huge pleasure to take part into those events, helping other teachers and sharing all sort of strategies and all sort of approaches and methodology. So it's a huge pleasure to be here with you tonight. Uh, as usual, ever since I started working with little kids and young learners and very young learners, I learned that we adults can learn a lot from stories, from stories that are read aloud. And when I was planning, when I was thinking about this webinar, I chose a story to tell you. So before we actually get into the topic of strategies on managing young learners, on distance or virtually, I decided to tell you a story. So I'm going to read you one of my favorite English stories. It's a child. It's a a child's story, but it's still a very valid reading for whoever wants to take part or interpret a very nice story. So the story I'm going to share with you before the webinar actually begins is The Invisible Boy, and it makes me think about everything we're going through at this moment now. How are our students feeling alone at home without any sort of um, peer contact or without any sort of communication with their friends? And we know that communication might be happening, but not the way it was supposed to be happening for young learners and very young learners. So this book made me think about that. So let's get started. I hope you like this story. Some of you might already know, right? Because most of you or some of you work in bilingual schools, and this is a very famous book. So, The Invisible Boy. I will just give you a glance. It's a very nice story. Can you see Brian, the Invisible Boy? Even Mrs. Carlotti has trouble noticing him in her classroom. She's too busy dealing with Nathan and Sophie. Nathan has problems with what Mrs. Carlotti calls volume control. He uses his outside voice inside too much. Sophie whines and complains when she doesn't get her way. Nathan and Sophie take up a lot of space. Brian doesn't. When the bell rings for recess, Micah and JT take turns choosing kids for their kickball teams. The best players get picked first. Then the best friends of the best players. Then the friends of the best friends. Only Brian is left, still waiting and hoping. JT glances in Brian's direction and just as quickly looks away. We've got enough players for each team, he tells the others. Let's play ball! And Brian is probably not feeling okay. In the cafeteria, Madison and her friends talk about her birthday party. The rope swing over the pool was awesome, says JT. Yeah, so was the water slide, adds Fiona. That was the best pool party ever. I'm so glad you guys had fun, says Madison. Everybody did, except Brian. He wasn't invited. At choosing time, while the other kids play board games and read, Brian sits at his table doing what he loves to do best. He draws fire breathing dragons scaling tall buildings. Thank you for toasting my marshmallow. Greedy pirates digging for treasure. Crackers are yay. Space aliens locked in intergalactic battles. I got you now. And superheroes with the power to make friends wherever they go. Hi, friend, have a cookie. Hi. On Monday morning, Mrs. Carlotti introduces Justin, a new student, to the class. Brian smiles shyly at him. Some of the other kids sneak looks at Justin, trying to figure out if he's cool enough to be their friend. They haven't quite made up their minds yet. At lunch, Madison and JT watch Justin eat with chopsticks. What's that? Asks Madison as she points at Justin's food. It's bulgogi. Bul what? Bulgogi. It's a Korean barbecued beef. My grandma made it for me. It's really good. Do you wanna try some? There's no way I'd eat bulgogi. And the kids laugh, all of them, that is, except Brian. He sits there wondering which is worse, being laughed at or feeling invisible. The next day, when Justin goes to his cubby to put away his backpack, he notices a piece of paper with his name on it. Justin, I thought the bulgogi looked good. Brian, yum! And there is a nice drawing that Brian is giving to Justin. At morning recess, Brian finds a piece of chalk on the ground and starts drawing away. You're Brian, right? Yeah. Thanks for the note. Hey, Justin! Emilio calls out from the threadball court. You're up next! Sorry, I gotta go, says Justin. By the way, that's a really cool drawing, he adds, before taking off. Back in class, Mrs. Carlotti asks the kids to team up in twos or threes for a special project. The kids scurry around the room to pair off. Brian heads towards Justin. Brian, Brian, I'm already with Justin, says Emilian. Find someone else. Brian looks at the floor, wishing he could draw a hole right there to swallow him up. And then Justin says, Mrs. Carlotti said we have up to three people. Our group can be up to three people. We're only two. Come on, Emilio, let him work with us. Okay, I guess. Mrs. Carlotti gives the class directions for the project. Your assignment is to work together to write a story about what you see in that photograph. Use your imagination and have fun. Whoa, cool, says Emilio. What kind of people do you think would live in houses like that? I don't know, but I bet Brian could draw them to go with our story, says Justin. Brian smiles as he takes out his lucky pen. Then they worked together to prepare the project. It's lunchtime again, Brian's least favorite part of the day. Another 20 long minutes of kids talking and laughing with everyone else but him. Brian! He hears someone shout. Hey, Brian, over here! Brian turns and sees Justin waving him over. Emilio nods at Brian, as he makes room for him at the table. And then they all sit together to have lunch. Cookie? Thanks. Maybe, just maybe, Brian's not so invisible after all. The end. Well, guys, this made me think about our kids now and how they are feeling and how can we help them go through this situation and this pandemic that is all around the world. And this is why I suggested very dearly this topic to Breast TESOL to be transmitted into a webinar. Well, I'm not a professional on digital tools and digital teaching, but after some time, I actually got a few experience from teaching online, and I think it's worth sharing around. So before we actually start the presentation, I need to tell you that there is no pro talking here. It's a sharing moment of everything I've been through, and I'll share some of the things that worked and some of the things that didn't work, and that way we can be stronger together. So I'm going to screen share with you now, and I'm going to show you my PowerPoint presentation. I really hope you enjoy it, and then we're going to get started. So here we have managing. Can ever I think everybody can see my PowerPoint now. Yes, perfect. Managing Young Learners Virtually by Gabriel Vieira. And first things first, right? So I will start by telling you what our agenda is. What's our schedule for today? So what is it that we're going to talk about today? The first thing I would like to talk to you about is what does it mean to teach young learners and very young learners? Understanding the difference between young learners and very young learners is very important when you are planning your lessons, when you are assessing your students, because they are different. We cannot just get all the kids in the school and put them together in a classroom and pretend they are the same, because they are not. They are all the time progressing. They are all the time growing up and changing, and they go through phases. And these learning stages are very important for teachers to understand. We have to understand these phases uh, at, for when we are planning our lessons. So when we plan our lessons, we have to take this into consideration. After that, we're going to have I'm going to introduce you or show to you some tools that I have used to teach young learners and very young learners, and also adults during this quarantine period. Then we're going to start sharing some strategies that I used, and that I carry on with my students. I'm used to apply them all, and I will share some of the sentences that I usually tell my students, and if it works or not, and how much I had to change over time, so that I achieved what I really wanted as a teacher. Because this is also important, right? A teacher should set his own goals as professionals. So we should know where we are at and where we want to get and what we have to do in order to get to that place, to that goal, in order to achieve that goal. And after that, I'm going to discuss some of my impressions of what is good and what is bad about what is happening to education now. After that, we're going to talk about what's next. I'm not really sure if there is a next, but uh, I'll show you what I thought about it. Okay? And I'll be very happy to answer any questions by the end of the presentation. So please, if you have questions, just make sure you post them down there and then we can share. Or if you have any experiences you would like to share, you can also post it on the comments and then we can share live. If you have any opinions or anything regarding teaching young learners and very young learners, anything will be very welcomed by the end of the presentation, and I'll be very happy to have a conversation with you. I forgot to mention, this is the very first time I'm giving a non interactive lecture, so I might feel a little bit weird talking to the camera. So I'm sorry if I keep looking somewhere else, but I feel I'm talking to the computer, so I feel a bit weird. Anyway, let's get started. So, the first thing is, what does it mean to teach young learners and very young learners? There is a difference in there. They're not all the same, okay? In this picture, for example, you can see a range of different young learners that could easily be sorted out into very young learners and young learners. And in this other picture, you could see one little guy that could definitely be considered a very young learner. According to international standards and according to Cambridge University, young learners are all students who are not yet adults or young adults. So up to 15 or up to 16, they would be considered young learners. So teenagers are young learners as well, and we have to take this into consideration when we're planning our lessons. We cannot teach teenagers the same way we teach a toddler, for example. And very young learners are the preschoolers. So up to 6 years old, they're considered very young learners. So what do they have in common? What young learners and very young learners have in common? Well, both of them need movement. They need to move to learn. We know that. Apart from all the learning styles, we know that most of them are like movement learners, and they need to be touching things, they need to be manipulate things to learn. That happens to adults as well. So when we are learning, it's very good for most of us to have something to manipulate with. So to have words to build up on, or to have a text in our hands, and so on. We also know that they are very talkative. So they like to share stuff in the classroom. They like to raise their hands. They like to share ideas. They like to share connections, and so on. We also know, I'm talking about both of them, that they're capable of developing their own opinions. I'm not talking about the quality of that opinions or how extensive that opinion is, but I'm talking about that they are capable of telling you if they like or not something. So they are able to develop opinions. Now, what's different? What is different between young learners and very young learners? When it comes to teaching early childhood, when it comes to teaching very young learners, you have to consider that this is a whole new journey for them. They have just started a new trip, a new educational trip, and they're learning everything for the first time. They're seeing everything for the first time. And they are adapting, they are adapting to being away from their parents. They're away from their parents. They're adapting to holding the pencil. They're adapting to holding the book. They're adapting to behave, to go to the bathroom. So it's a whole new world. Very young learners is a very delicate topic because as I'm telling you, they are seeing everything for the first time. Now, young learners, it's not that they're not seeing things for the first time as well, but they already gather some experience that they bring up from being a very young learner before. So it's like a long process. So they started without knowing anything, and then they moved up the line of learning until a point in which they already had some experience. And after that, they start using this previous experience and apply new knowledges and apply these old knowledges to create new ones. uh, what I'm trying to say is young learners, they are more capable of using previous experiences to create new knowledge. That's what I'm trying to say. And we have to consider that whenever we are planning our lessons. And planning is the secret for being a good teacher. If you plan your lessons, even and by planning, I'm not talking about a formal document in which you have to fill out and deliver to the school administration. I'm talking about thinking about what you're going to do. So doing things intentionally. And when you are thinking about what you're doing, then you have to focus on those differences. These differences, they are super important for whatever you're planning to do with your young learners and very young learners. But let's move on. Uh, the thing is, this generation was already born in this high tech world. So teaching young learners virtually is not something old. It's not something new. It's actually something old, and it's been going on for quite some time now. There are some international platforms that actually are recruiting teachers now to teach kids around the world online. And they're doing that because they realized that kids have the power to manipulate technology better than adults sometimes. So we're talking about a whole new generation that is involved in Xboxes, PlayStations, computer playing, and everything else. And this makes them a very good audience for this type of lessons we're trying to give. So nothing. I mean, we're not doomed yet. We still have hope that this online and digital community will work in terms of teaching, because I know that many teachers around the world and around Brazil are suffering a lot now because they are trying to adapt their classes into the virtual world. Well, I'm going to show to you some platforms that have been doing that for some time. The first one is Cambly Kids. So Cambly Kids is a platform in which one kid is linked to one tutor, and then they have one-on-one lessons. The good thing about this platform is that the pay is in dollars. So they are currently recruiting. So if you want to teach online and learn more about this, sign up for Cambly Kids. It's very nice. It's a platform that it's been on the market for 10 years, I guess. So they've been teaching kids online for 10 years. Another platform that teaches kids online is Tutor ABC. This one is actually a school, and it's not based on Brazil. This is from Bangladesh, I guess, but it teaches English as a second language in an international context online, and they build up groups up to 5 kids. So they get 5 kids into a online classroom and they have a specific curriculum to follow and they teach them. This company has been going on for 11 years, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more. Paulfish. Paulfish is another company that offers online lessons for kids. They also have a whole set of training courses for new teachers and are currently recruiting as well. So teachers can teach remotely from their houses children in China, for example. So if you have trouble sleeping, like myself, if you suffer from insomnia, this is a good platform to apply for because usually when it's night here, it's day there, and they're having classes. So I strongly recommend that you look into those platforms, and they also offer free strategies and free articles for teachers to read about online teaching. But what am I trying to tell you with this PowerPoint, with this pictures over there, and with those companies? I'm trying to tell you that online teaching is not new. It's something that has been going on for quite some time. And if you do a little digging on the internet, you are going to find lots of interesting stuff that can be used online. That's how I did my research, and that's how I found out some tools that I could use with my students, and some of them worked, some others didn't. And as we are not used to, okay, I'm going to talk about myself, as I'm not used to teaching kids online, or I was not used to teaching kids online, those tools helped me a lot. They helped me like 100%. Besides that, collaboration with other teachers also helped me. So this is just to tell you and just to show you that this has been going on for quite some time now. All right. So let's move on. I'm still talking about what does it mean to teach young learners and very young learners. What do we know about young learners and very young learners? As I told you, they need movements, they need to move around, um, they need to share their ideas, they need to feel welcomed, they need to feel loved, and this is very very important. Teaching young learners and very young learners is not only about being a technical teacher. You have to be able to connect with your students. They feel that connection, and it's very interesting because between us, me and you teachers, sometimes we don't have connections with students, and it's okay to say that. But with adults, you can somehow just ignore the fact that you don't have a connection with that particular student and move your class forward. When it comes to teach young learners and very young learners, they can feel it. It's amazing how they feel the type of bond you are building up with them, and that comes from very early in the school year and moves along all the way up to the end of the school year. And you have to keep that relationship going. This is super important when it comes to teaching very young learners and young learners. One more thing that we have to take into consideration when we are talking about teaching young learners and very young learners is their concentration span. Well, everybody here, I believe, understands that we people have a limited time of concentration. We cannot concentrate for long periods of time. So kids can't concentrate for long periods of time as well. And the younger the child is, the smaller concentration time this child will have. For example, a kid, a child with 4 years old, that is 4 years old, would be able to concentrate from 8 to 20 minutes on average. I would say that when planning, we should consider the smallest time, because most of the kids, they most of young learners and very young learners, they cannot keep a concentration up for a long period of time. They can't, and we know that because we are educators, we're teachers. Anyways, this is something that you have to consider when you're planning your lessons, and you have to consider when you're planning your lessons virtually as well. Gabriel, are you telling me that I cannot move along with an hour class that is taught online? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have to find strategies to break up this hour into smaller hours or smaller minutes, to make your student more attentive. If you have your class broken down in small periods of time, then your student will be more likely to pay attention to what you're saying. Especially because now you don't have the physical contact. Especially because now you don't have the human contact that we would have in a classroom, in a real classroom. Oh, saying real classroom sounded weird. In a regular classroom, virtual classrooms are actual classrooms as well. Anyway, having said that, I have a list of transitions that you can use with your young learners and very young learners between one activity and the other. This is something very important, and these are just some suggestions that I use with my students, and many teachers also use with their students. Well, between one activity and another, you can read a short poem. Why not? Kids love rhyme. They love to listen to rhymes, and they love to be read at. They love to have someone reading to them. So it's very interesting to have a set of poems to read between one activity and the other. You can also use poems to time out, clean up, for example. I have never used poems that way, but I've seen teachers around the world who have used it, who have used them, and they tell me it worked quite well. Dancing is a nice transition. Maybe when the time for the activity is over, you could just clap your hands 3 times, and all the kids would come to the circle or to the meeting area dancing or making a fun dance. That would be very nice. They like doing that. Oh, this is something important. Whenever you come up with an activity like that, everybody in the classroom must participate. Even though we're talking about online classes, I know that some of you have assistant teachers, and assistant teachers are sometimes with us inside in the lives, following up the lessons, helping us with microphones and so on. The TA, the teaching assistant, needs to participate as well. The helpers needs to participate. Everybody who is around should participate. Otherwise, they might feel left out and maybe embarrassed, and they might not be willing to participate or take part into the activity you are suggesting. So that's why when you suggest a crazy dance, then you have to do a crazy dance as well. uh, Another activity that is a nice transition activity is simply walking around the room. Okay, guys, time's up. Let's clean up, and 1 minute for you to walk around the room. Just walk around the room, and they like that. They would walk around, look what's going on. Maybe some fresh air would come to their heads. The blood would circulate better, and then they would be prepared and refreshed for a new lesson. Uh, another thing that is very important and very nice for transitions is singing songs. I wrote here some examples like hello and goodbye, but there are many others. Clean up song, clean up, for example. This is just an example. So you can actually build up a transition routine with your students and implement that into your virtual world, which I'm going to talk about next. So don't worry. This I know that this workshop is about managing young learners and very young learners virtually. I will get to that point. Everything I'm talking about is to build up until I get to the point. Another example is counting boys and girls. Before you start a new activity, you could ask your students to stand up and sort them out into boys and girls, and you just count them out loud, and then you'd give your students the opportunity to have contact with numbers, speaking. You would expose them to dynamic practices. You can also do that virtually, and I'll tell that later. Uh, and you could have redirectioning tasks, and this would be for older students. You could have some cards, and in this card you could say, if you're done, get a book and read, or if you have finished your activity, just move along and get a math activity in the math folder and complete this task. So you could have a bunch of early finishers activities just ready to go whenever you are transitioning into a new activity. Another thing that is interesting and that I would like to share in this part of the presentation and in this part of the webinar is for very young learners. As their attention span is very low, when you are going from one place to another place, it's also extremely important to keep them concentrated so that you avoid accidents. Singing songs is something very nice. So when you are going, for example, let's say from the classroom to the playground, why don't you choose a song with them and sing along on the way so that they can keep their concentration on the song, and maybe they're going to get to that place faster. So this is just a suggestion, and I know that I'm thinking now about the physical classroom, but it's a valid suggestion that you can use and overuse later. Anyway, let's move on. So after all this information, what I have to tell you: breathe, keep calm, and just keep swimming. We cannot give up now. I've heard lots of comments of colleagues all around Brazil and all around the world, of friends who are willing, and they're literally willing to give up on their jobs and their dream jobs, that is to be teachers, just because the situation is not easy. Well, the situation now is not easy for anyone. Having to readapt and recreate yourself is a very difficult process. Well, if you are not from one of those platforms that were going on for long ago, then it is a very difficult process. It was for me, and it was for some of my friends, and I'm sure there are some teachers around the world and around Brazil that are giving up on being very good teachers just because they couldn't handle the transition from physical teaching, hands-on teaching, to virtual teaching. But that's my message after all this information: keep calm and just keep swimming. We have to keep swimming, as Dory said. Still talking about young learners and very young learners, here are some informations that we have talked about so far. Very young learners, they have low attention span, they are less independent, they need more parental support, screen time should be reduced, learning process is better stimulated when hands-on tasks are used, concrete learning. They have just started up their educational paths, and adapting to school routines could be very challenging. So this is what we know about about very young learners so far. What about young learners? They have a higher attention span, they are more independent and digitally fluent, less parental support is needed, screen time should be reduced. However, they already spend most of their free time online anyways. Deepen reading strategies are required for their literacy process to move forward. Scanning, scheming, inferences, drawing conclusions, and lexical resource may or may not be reduced at this point. So here I'm giving you a general idea of the bilingual context, and for example, and when we're talking about literacy. What about EFL and ESL learners? So when we're teaching English in a language school, uh that's the last item here. That's what the last item is making reference to. Their lexical resource may or may not be reduced. So when they get to be teenagers, we often get two types of teenagers. Often, I'm not saying that that's a rule, but often when we're teaching teenagers or young learners as a whole, we often have someone who has a huge vocabulary range, and in the same group, and we have that other little guy that doesn't know a word in English. And this could be something good because you could pair them up, or not. So that's why I wrote there may or may not be something good. This would be a discussion for another webinar. I just included it there because this is a trait, this is a characteristic of young learners as well. When we receive them, when we get them into our classrooms, that's what we have. So this is what we know so far. I hope we're doing good. I hope you are following me. I hope you're not wishing to throw stones at me. So let's move on. Which tools did I find most useful when I'm talking about teaching young learners and very young learners? Well, I'm going to start presenting a few tools that you can use, and some of them are for free. The first one is Zoom. Most of you might have heard of Zoom already. This is a very nice tool because it allows you to divide the participants of the meeting into breakout rooms. So you can divide them into smaller rooms, and then the host can travel along the rooms, and the host, the teacher, can monitor and listen to what they're saying. And maybe if you are working with um, let's say older young learners, you could be sure that they were on task and doing what you asked. With adults, you can have pair discussions, group discussions, and even develop projects with them. Just last week I was teaching a group of adults, and I had them create a text together in a collaborative way, and it was very nice. It was a very nice way of using this platform. With kids and young learners and very young learners, it could be used just the same. It could be just the same. You could train them to use the platform, and then after they would be pros, I'm sure. There is this other one that is called Free Conference. This one, I have to tell you that I have not experienced, but it was very well recommended by a Swiss company. Uh, so it might be very good. I decided to show you, to share with you, because maybe you are willing to try, and it came from a very trustful source. So somebody told me that it was a good platform to teach young learners, and it came from a school in Switzerland, and it was from a very dear friend of mine, so this might work. I can't talk much about Free Conference because I have not used it, but I decided to bring it up for you because maybe you want to use it as well. Another platform that you can use to teach young learners is Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams works like a pedagogical Facebook. So you can post assignments, students can comment on assignments, and you can video call them, and you can make conferences with the whole group together. You can own a classroom, and you can be the manager of that classroom. The thing is, for Microsoft Teams, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, I'm not really sure, but as far as I know, there could only be one manager per classroom. Well, the other one is, of course, Google for Education. Most schools around the world and here in Brazil are using Google support to teach children. It is very nice because you have a range of different documents and a range of different tools you can use with your students. You can share documents. This presentation, for example, was created using Google Docs. You can have a meet with them. You can also have projects with them. You can do a range of things with Google Meet, and you can integrate all the applications Google offers, into one place that is your Google Classroom. So everything that Google can possibly offer to you is there inside the Google Classroom, and it's very easy to use. It's not complicated, so I think that's a good one to go. Skype, this is an old friend of ours. I think Skype, most teachers would be familiar with, right? You can have group conferences, you can have one-on-one conferences. So yes, so this is a valid tool to share as well. So I have used all those tools with the exception of Free Conference. And all those tools were very nice. They had a very nice go in my computer, which is not a very good computer, but it had a very nice go on it. It didn't keep on dropping all the time. Actually, it was quite stable, and I really liked using Google for Education, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom. Free Conference, we're going to try together next time. Okay, next time we're teaching a private student or something, we're going to try to use Free Conference, and then we're going to be able to share more details about it. Now, let's keep on tools. It's not only live lessons. We don't give only live lessons in this new virtual world. We actually teach. We actually teach kids through video lessons, and I believe it's even more difficult to record a video than teach live. What do you think? Now, this is an interesting question. Recording videos involves editing, involves maybe reshooting the video, maybe implementing with subtitles. So certainly, recording videos gives us teachers more work than giving live lessons. But we are required to do that now that we are in this pandemic situation. And I brought up some tools that you can use to record your own videos. Loom, it got to me through my coordinator. So thank you, Danny. It was a very nice tip. I really liked it. My coordinator sent me a video using Loom, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I started doing my videos using this application. You can either decide to do that online or to download the app into your computer and use it. I'm going to show to you an example in a few minutes. OBS Studio was a tip given by my dear friend Mayara. She taught me how to use it and how to edit the video using this app. And it's very easy to use. Once you got the trick, it's like this. And then I would really recommend you to download this into your computer and have this installed until this pandemic is over and we're not required to teach online anymore. This is a tool that I found out myself. So I'm proud of myself because this one I found out by myself. The Microsoft Whiteboard. All computers that are Microsoft based, they come with this program already installed. It's Microsoft Whiteboard, and you can create different classrooms, different boards for your classrooms in this app. So I teach grades 1, 5, and 6, for example. And in my Microsoft Whiteboard, I have one whiteboard for grade 5, one whiteboard for grade 1, and one whiteboard for grade 6. And what is very good about this tool is that it's very similar to Prezi. Do you know Prezi? Prezi is a presentation tool, and this application is very similar to Prezi. You can zoom in, zoom out, you can expand pictures, and you can even write if you have the devices. For example, I would show to you now, but it's very difficult to show to you now. If you have a digitalizing table, for example, you could even write as if you were writing in an actual whiteboard. So this is a very nice tool. It has the function of locking pictures on the background, moving pictures around, and you can interact with the older students. So if you have older students and they have a Microsoft account, they can collaborate with you to create texts and so on. It's a very nice tool, and I would recommend that you gave it a go. Another tool that I really like is the Active Inspire, and you can download it and go on free trial for 60 days, so 2 months. It's a very nice application as well. It's very similar to the Microsoft Whiteboard. The difference is, I believe so, that the way the Microsoft Whiteboard functions, for me, it's better. But I use both. I use both Microsoft Whiteboard and Active Inspire. I use both programs in my computer. Both of them work very well, and both of them should definitely be given a go if you are trying to figure out which tool to use while teaching online. I spoke too much. I'm tired. So, I would like to show you an example of how these applications work. So this is an example of a lesson that I recorded using Loom, the application that my coordinator suggested. I'm not sure if you are going to listen to that. I would like to give it a go, so I'm going to play it for you. Of course, it's a long lesson. We're not going to watch the entire lesson. It's just to give you an example on how this application works, okay? So let's give it a go. I hope you like it. Welcome to this ELA class, and I have something very nice to tell you. Today, we are starting a new unit. Today, we're starting a unit called Nonfiction Writing Biographies. Do you know what a biography is? Well, during this unit, we're going to study about the criteria we have to follow to write biographies. We are going to read a range of different biographies, and we're going to learn how to write our own biography. We're also going to learn about the differences between a general biography and an autobiography, which is very important. And to start our day, I would like to introduce you to this book that I found online. I am not going to read this entire book. I am going to read part of it. And then you are going to continue reading independently. But here is the thing, this book is a type of biography. So as I'm reading the book, I would like you to take notes of interesting facts that you can catch from the reading that could connect with the topic biographies. Okay? It could be characteristics of the written style. It uses lots of adjectives. It's written in first person. It has long paragraphs. It has short paragraphs. It talks about general aspects of someone's life. It talks about specific aspects of someone's life. So I don't know. You are going to listen to me reading, and then you are going to read independently, and then you are going to take notes about important aspects of this genre. Okay? And I'm also expecting that you will feel curious about this book as I felt. I was very curious as I was reading it. So let me put my face up here. And the title of the book is Eight Amazing Women in History. Let's get started. I'm going to read about three of them, and you will be responsible to read about the others. Okay? Remember, take notes because during our live lesson later on, I'm going to ask you questions about it. And if you have questions, you will be able to ask them to me as well. So let's go. I'm so excited about this book. Women throughout history have done great things. They have led the way for little girls everywhere to have big dreams. These eight amazing women left their marks on the world. And I'm thinking here, first video made with Loom, and after that I've learned how to do a few things like do this and pretend that I'm pushing the little ball away, so it's very nice. Or sometimes I just say I'm going to jump and the ball's going to go up, and then I jump and then the circle just goes up. What I like about this platform is that it's very very easy to use. All you have to do is download the software, and that's exactly what I was seeing when I was recording this video. I could see my face, I could see where I was, I could see which facial expressions I was doing, and that's exactly what the student sees. So you can record the video with the Loom application, then you can edit, you can even download the video, you can transform it into mp4, and then you can maybe mix two different videos up. uh, I was working with my teaching assistant, and we made a math video in which we talked together. It was very nice. She started the lesson, I carried it on, then she modeled the example that we were requiring from the students, and then I closed the lesson. And we did all of that away from each other, and it was very engaging for the students. I mean, I received a very nice feedback from parents, and I believe they liked it. So let's move on to what we're here for, right? We're here to talk about the strategies and all of that. All that I said was to get to this point. So now I'm going to share some of the strategies on how to manage young learners. and very young learners. Okay, and all of this that I'm going to tell you, it must be applied virtually. The first one is use plenty of movement. If you listen to me, touch your nose. For example, that's one very nice strategy, and that's something that you can use in your live lessons and recorded lessons. In the math lesson I just talked to you about my teaching assistant was teaching the students how to read number words, and then she said, "What number is this? One. So let's clap our hands once. What number is this? Two. So let's clap our hands twice." And then students get to move a little bit, they get to interact with the computer. So that's why I say use plenty of movement in your lessons, especially for very young learners. They need that. And if you do that, you're going to keep them engaged for more time, for longer, I'm sorry. um, Involve the kids into a meaningful conversation. Do not be automatic with them. Pretend you are in a real classroom. Listen to them. It's very important. It's very important. Be understanding as for the moment we're passing through. We teachers are not the only ones suffering with this pandemic. Everybody is. Being inside, being indoors for a long time is hard enough for us. Can you imagine for little ones? So sometimes they will cry in front of the webcam, and sometimes they're going to complain, or sometimes they're not going to be participative. You have to drag it out of them somehow, through movement, through engaging lessons, through some other things that I'm going to talk to you further on. So this is very nice. You have to have meaningful conversation with kids. You have to understand them, and whatever you talk to them, whatever you are willing them to understand must be true, because they will understand. Young learners and very young learners are very sensitive in these terms, and you have to mean what you mean. Listen, it's very important. Listening is a skill that is running out of business recently in all professions, right? I'm not here when I say listen, I'm not only talking about teaching, I'm talking about everything else. We have to listen. We have to listen better. We have to be able to listen to what our students are saying. And by listen, I'm not just saying using your ears, I'm saying visually. Sometimes they are not willing to tell you, but we have to feel them. We have to know what is going on. Just 2 days ago, I had a student in front of the camera that used to be a very participative student, and she wasn't at all. And then by the end of the lesson, I dismissed the class, and then I told her, "Hey, can you stay?" And then she stayed, and then I asked her, "What's going on? I felt you a little bit over the clouds today. Are you okay?" And this question made her cry. She said that she was anxious. And this is very important because I listened to her. After she started putting it all outside, she felt better. Sometimes we need someone to listen to us. And sometimes for students, we are these people. We are the people that will listen to them, no matter how young they are. They could be toddlers, they could be from early childhood, they could be from elementary school, they could be from an English course, language course. We have to listen to them. It's a very important strategy, even now. And it's not easy. It's not easy. We have to work ourselves out in order to be um, understanding and listen to them. So the next strategy, this is very important. Negotiate and have well thought out digital class contracts. Guys, we have class contracts in a regular classroom. Why wouldn't we have class contracts in a virtual classroom? Of course we have to have a class contract. If you are using a platform that in which you are unable to mute their microphones, then you have to tell them microphones must be off. Your hand, if you want to speak, you have to raise your hands. And all of your classroom rules and negotiations must be very clear for them. The same way when we're teaching in a regular classroom, as opposed from a virtual classroom, we usually have a poster on the wall, and we usually refer to the poster all the time. Do you remember that rule? Do you remember this agreement? Do you remember that in the beginning of the year we mentioned this, this, and that? We have to find a way to do the very same thing into a virtual classroom. If your platform doesn't allow you to pen a note on the wall, and on the wall of whatever platform you're using, maybe sending the agreements whenever you start a lesson is a good idea. But they must be aware of what you expect from them. They must be aware of what you expect from them. I'm going to repeat this once again because it's very important. They must be aware of what teachers are expecting from them. If they are not aware of what you are expecting from them, then you are not going to have a good classroom management, and you are going to crash all the time. So, this is something very important. Be as dynamic as possible. Use and overuse chants, poems, short passages. As I told you, transition. Use transition activities. When you are moving from one activity to the other, use transitions. Make sure they know it's time to wrap up one activity to move into the other. Make sure you give them some time to breathe. Make sure you give them some time for the blood to flow up and down. Make sure some oxygen goes to their brain, and stimulates them to think more and be more attentive. This is something quite important. You have to be dynamic. If you are in a live class, why don't you ask your students to stand up wherever they are and jump 3 times, or clap their hands 3 times? Or maybe you could have one volunteer to create a crazy dance, and then everyone else around the virtual classroom could crazy dance as well. And then you could see that, and then you can name it. Hey, little Jordan, I can see that you were dancing. Very good. Hey, Catherine, you were dancing very beautifully there. I can see you from here. Communicate with your students in the transition moments. Bond with them. Make sure they know what's happening. Students, no matter what age, they must know exactly what's happening. And above all, the most important rule, the most important advice I could ever give to you now is be consistent. You cannot be inconsistent. You have to be consistent. This is super important. So if you say something, you cannot unsay something. If you say that students are allowed to speak when their hands are up, the students can only speak when their hands are up. Gabriel, what if they just burst out and butt in my conversation, my teaching? Then you say, hey, just a minute. Remember our agreement. We are only allowed to speak when we raise our hands. I know that what you have to say is very interesting, but I really would appreciate if you follow the procedure. And then if you see that this is a recurrent behavior all around, then you could practice. Hey, little boys and girls, I know that we have to practice a few learning behaviors today, and one of them is raising our hands to speak. So let's imagine that everybody here has something to say. So let's raise our hands in silence. Very good. I could see that everybody's raising their hands in silence. Way to go. We have to value the process and the routine that we're trying to establish. Sometimes we ask a question, and then when we ask a question, lots of students starts to butt in or throw answers at us, and then we lose control. And that's the time where you stop everybody and say, oh, that's not what we agreed about. That's not what we agreed on. We agreed on raising our hands to speak. So let's practice it one more time. And guys, honestly, it takes time. It's not like this. It takes a long time for you to educate your students, for you to get your students into the routine, for you to get your students into the consistent agreements that you're going to establish with them in the beginning of the year. Gabriel, are you telling me that it's impossible to do that later on? No, you can always redo. Redo is something very important for students, for teachers, for everyone. We're not perfect. We make things. We sometimes make things wrong, and it's totally okay to redo something. So if you think we're not being consistent enough, try to be more consistent. Well, I found a video, and I think it's a very nice video. And this video talks about consistency. It talks about consistency in regular classrooms. And later on, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing with my students virtually to keep up with my consistency. First, let's watch this video. I hope you like this video. It's a very nice one. I liked it. That's why I decided to share.
Really, the only way to establish consistency in your classroom is to be consistent in the way that you are enforcing your expectations with your students or reinforcing your expectations with students. But that's easier said than done. So, one thing you can do is to really practice being consistent in one particular area of your teaching. And then that practice will not only help you be consistent in that area, but will spread to your general ability to be consistent. For example, a good place to start is with students raising their hands to speak. That's a good place to start because we all do it. We all ask students to raise their hands to speak. Some of us do it a lot more routinely than others, but we all do it sometimes. So there are so many opportunities to potentially practice being consistent around that. Just a note though, being consistent around having students raise their hands to speak is not about getting them to raise their hands every time they speak. It's only about getting it when we ask for it. Sometimes we don't want them to raise their hands. Sometimes I might say to a class, "Are we ready then?" And I'm expecting a general response from kind of everybody in the class at one time. But if I say, "Raise your hand and let me know if you know an answer to question number 6, then I expect a raised hand. And if a student blurts out, or a student raises their hand and then blurts out, if I honor that blurted out response, I'm not consistently reinforcing my hand raising rule. Once kids understand that you will honor a blurted out response even when you've asked for a raised hand, that's all you're going to get. And the noise level is off the charts and your consistency is deteriorating. So when you ask for it, make sure you get it. If you asked for the raised hand, the student blurts out an answer, "Thank you, Sally, for going halfway with that procedure. I do actually need you to wait until I call on you, though. If you would please raise your hand, wait until I call on you. I'll call on you. We can talk about what you said." Right? Reinforcing the procedure or honoring the procedure before or above we honor this response, even if it was a correct response or an interesting response or came from a student who doesn't normally participate. We still need to establish a routine of consistency in our classroom. And practicing around one area like hand raising will help us build that and spread that consistency to all areas of our teaching.
Video, and I have this question for you: how to do that digitally? How to be consistent digitally? I think I was lucky because I had very well established routines with my students before we went on lockdown and before classes were suspended. So it's very nice to see that these teachers set works. Whenever I get into the classroom, um, my students already know what to do. They mute their microphones. What I had to do when we started teaching virtually was just to remind them of the rules for like a week. So during a week, I kept on telling them, guys, remember microphones must be off. I can see that some microphones are not off. I'm only starting when all the microphones are off. And then I wait. Recently, we have established that our students would have to be with their cameras on. So I kept on saying, hey, boys and girls, I'm only going to start a lesson when I have all the cameras on. If the cameras are not on, then I'm not going to start the lesson. Or in the middle of the lesson, somebody turns off their camera. Hey, guys, let's just remember something. Let's stop for a minute. Our camera should be on or off right now. They should be on. Can you please turn on your cameras, everybody? I can see some students have their cameras off, for example. So, what I'm telling you is that everything that she said applies for the virtual classroom as well. Everything that she says. I remember an example that I really wanted to share now from when I started, when I was a when I had just started teaching in a bilingual context. I was practicing consistency with this example that she said, um, raising hands, and I had this rule that they could only speak if they raised their hands, and it used to happen like this: they want to say something, they raise their hands, they blurt out, and then I used to say, okay, but you have to put your hands down in order for me to listen to you. But yes, and then the student would put the hands down. But yes, there was a very valid comment. So I wasn't honoring my procedure. My coordinator pointed that out for me while she was observing my lesson, and I managed to overcome this challenge of being consistent. Then I started reading a lot about being consistent, watching lots of videos, and the same thing she said we have to do to be consistent is what we have to transpose into our online teaching. All right. I hope you are following so far, and I hope you are enjoying this webinar so far. Let's carry it on. Always mean what you mean. Remember, you're the boss. This phrase. This phrase came from a Canadian trainer that visited us in the school that I'm working at right now, and we often have one-on-one meetings about our lessons, our lesson plannings, and our students. And she said, Gabriel, you're the boss. You're the boss. You have to establish the routine with your students and mean what you mean. You always have to mean. And then I remember that sometimes we can't win. Sometimes we have a very challenging student, and this student is saying no, no. Like we're asking this student to stand up, and this is a story that she told us, this trainer. And this student is sitting down, and you want the student to stand up, and you say, can you please stand up? And he says no. And then you say, can you please stand up? And then he says no. And just for you continue to be the boss, then you say okay, then you continue there, listen to the story from there, and then you go back, and then you carry on with your story. The student is still doing what you said, so you are still the boss in the classroom. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to have the control of your classroom. The control is the teacher's only. The teacher has the control of their classrooms. This is something very important, and this had a significant impact on my life as a teacher, and I decided to bring up as a teaching, a classroom management strategy. So if you tell your students that if they speak out during the class 3 times, you're going to banish them from the classroom. Do it. Always mean what. Always do what you mean. Mean what you mean. Do it. You cannot say something and then not do it. Which brings us to the next clue. Never promise something you cannot follow up on. So you work in a institution and you know the institution's rules, so you can never promise something that goes against the institution rules, because that would probably not wouldn't be very well seen by the administrator. So you shouldn't do that, and of course by other teachers as well. You can't just have conflictual relationships with the school that you work at. You have to work together with them. So you have to be aware of the school rules as a whole, so that you can mean what you mean with your students, if you know what I mean. Make sure you are gentle but firm. Keep in mind that having authority does not mean authoritarianism. Uh, It means that the power is yours. You have the power to control your classroom. You can manage your classroom. You can decide a lot of things. But it's very nice when you can involve your students into decision making process, when they can make decisions as well. So some things are rules and some things are agreements. Some things can be negotiated. Some things cannot be negotiated. Again, this must be consistently reinforced with the students day by day until the point that they know exactly what your response will be to that inappropriate behavior, for example. If you let go once, it's over. You cannot let go. You have to be extremely consistent with all of your agreements. And if you have to stop your lesson 10 times to talk about the agreements, stop 10 times to talk about it. Being firm but gentle. Only talk to students when they are ready to listen, no matter in which context you are. This is very important. Sometimes we are anxious to talk to students about inappropriate behaviors, and we just choose the wrong time to talk to them. When they are crying, agitated, when they are upset about something, it's not really the moment to talk about it. So you have to wait the student to calm down, and after the student calms down, then we are going to bring the topic back. You never talk to a young learner or a very young learner in the middle of a crisis. You have to wait this young learner or this very young learner to calm down, and then after this young learner, very young learner calms down, you go there and you talk to him or her, but you can never let go. This is something very important. Be consistent. If you are not consistent enough, then you are not going to have a good classroom management. So you have to practice being consistent. That's why I said it's one of the most important things. And what's good and what's bad about this all? We're getting more fluent on technology and it opens 1,000 doors. Students are getting more fluent with technology and it also opens lots of doors. It's not a dead end. We will eventually go back to regular teaching in the classroom, and some of us will carry on teaching online because we're becoming more digitally fluent, and it's an experience we will take to the grave because I believe we had the technology to do what we're doing now to teach our students from home, and this is something that 20 years ago nobody would ever have thought about it. And what's bad? Well, we require parental support, and some of them are not qualified for such a task. Because some of them are just not patient enough to help their children to move on, and we have to help both children and parents, and this could be frustrating sometimes. And twice as much planning. Yes, when you're teaching online, you have twice as much planning because there is lots of adaptation going on. There is lots of editing, cutting, pasting going on. There is lots of downloading, uploading going on, lots of webinars to attend, and so on. I could only see these two bad aspects of this moment, and I'm talking about, of course, I'm not, I'm focusing on the technical thing, okay? Of course what we're going on is worse in terms of pandemic and the world and etc. And then I ask you, what's next? Well, I don't really know what's next. I don't really know what's going to happen next. I just hope and think we have a good return to the schools, and I hope everything goes well fine. This is the end of this webinar. Thank you for being here. I really appreciated it. And this is my email if you have any questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's all for today. I hope you have enjoyed it. I'm going to check the comments now.
Hello.
Hello
Thank you,
there.
Gabriel. What an awesome subject. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. And for me, particularly, it was very enlightening and helpful. But I believe that only for me, but for all teachers watching. We have some, actually, we don't have some questions. We have one question till now. If you have any question, please write on the comments, and then Gabriel will answer. Okay. So we have one question here. Let me see. Sorry. YouTube caiu. What happened?
Well, I don't really know, but they told us to carry on and to finish it normally,
Okay.
to finish it up normally.
Okay. But we have one question. You can answer here, and then they can see. It was sent by Tamile Pinheiro. Does the number of students in classroom can interfere on young learner focusing time? What do you have to say?
Wellington, can you please repeat the question? Your audio kind of cut and I couldn't listen to you.
Okay, sorry. Does the number of students in classroom can interfere on young learners focusing time?
Well, I think so. I think you could interfere. The thing is, uh, it depends very much on the techniques you are using to teach them, and the amount of transitions you have, and the amount of consistency you follow in the classroom. So, if you are an inconsistent teacher, if you are still practicing consistency, then a large group of students would be a problem, would be some sort of problem. But if you are consistent enough and you are sure of what you're doing, then you can manage a huge number of students. And by huge, I mean 25, 28, that's
Mm,
the huge number. Because for young learners and very young learners, the average should be 10 to 15 learners inside a classroom. And that goes for bilingual education and for language courses.
yes. So thank you again, Gabriel. It was really nice to have you here today. Thank you so much. And this webinar will be available in our channel in YouTube, so you are able to share with your friends and your coworkers. And we
Thank
would
you.
like to thank you all for you who stand here till now. It was made by teachers for teachers. And please stay home and stay safe. See you later. Bye bye.
See you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everything.